Hello, I'm Paul Briley, and you're listening to Off the Comma. I'm a human who cares about supporting other humans. On this podcast, we explore all facets of what it means to feel stuck in life. We talk with people just like us who have found themselves sitting on a comma and not knowing where to go next. We will unpack the experience with them, where they've been stuck, what it feels like, what they experienced, and what they learned. My goal is to inspire you by seeing yourself in others. I believe that when we feel more connected and seen, magic can happen. If you find yourself sitting on a comma in your life, remember, you can also talk to me without a microphone. To explore coaching with me and getting off the comma in your own life, book a call with me at offthecomma.com. In the meantime, let's get into this week's conversation. We are back with another powerful episode of the podcast, Off the Comma, and so privileged to have another amazing guest this week to talk to us and share his story. And today I'm talking to Blair, someone who I've known through a couple of years and just really come to enjoy and value the friendship and the connection that we have. And I am going to just jump right in because I know we're both excited to kind of start sharing Blair's story. So, Blair, welcome to the podcast. Welcome to the conversation that doesn't involve a lunch table and us going way past the scheduled stop time.
That's very true. Way past the lunch hour.
Right. Yes, exactly. That's what I was trying to say. Years ago, it would have been past the happy hour, but there was no such thing.
No, there wasn't. Not during those hours.
Right. Blair, tell us, how would you like to be known? And then what would you like us to know about you?
Sure. So just a few things that I want people to know about me is just probably my resilience and determination just towards how I value my career, how I pursue educational efforts, just basically anywhere in the professional realm. That's kind of how I want people to know me. But in a personalized space, I definitely want people to know that I have an innate ability to connect with people on a personal level, really ensuring that I show compassion and empathy first before anything. So just ensuring that I have a personable approach to really not only connecting with others, but just being able to hold space for others in time of need. So I would say those are probably just some things that I really want people to know about me on a first name basis.
Those are really like important traits too. Obviously I resonate in these things too. So self-referencing, I love these. And I love how you said hold space for people. That's such a needed trait and skill in today's world.
Oh yeah, absolutely. We're missing a lot of it in corporate America, I'm sure, as you know. So.
Okay, we're getting a little preview of the direction your story might go. No, that's okay, because I mean, that's what this podcast is all about, right? First of all, it's your platform, it's your story. There is no like right or wrong or what you are or supposed to or should be saying. This, you're going to be sharing a story about your own experience, and so all these things are fair topics, right? What else would you like people to know about you, Blair?
So I guess just a few things, like aside from what I mentioned before, I would really want people to know about me is, sometimes I may get caught up in the weeds in terms of maybe like overextending and really being, I wouldn't say too helpful, but just getting caught up in what others are doing and maybe not prioritizing myself as much, which is where I've been able to kind of catch myself a bit and really learning how to kind of set boundaries with others and really just kind of having those moments where I also need to hold myself accountable to my decisions as much as the other party. And this is probably more so in a space of professional situations and interpersonal relationships. So those are probably just kind of some of the biggest battles that I'm currently facing right now, especially as a new leader in the human resources space, along with, kind of coming of age, whereas I'm closer to 30 and really managing my relationships with my family, my friends. They're all evolving in different ways. And it's always been, a thing of mine to really kind of sit back, observe, and evaluate how I want my relationships to look like moving forward and really learning, like the grieving process of kind of losing those relationships along the way.
There's so much packed in there. And I know more about you than the folks who are going to be listening, right? Well, some folks there's going to be people that know and love you who are going to be listening that know
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
about you. The point I was going to make is what I do know about you in the time that we've known each other is that career is very much one of your priorities, and that you are focused and determined, and you are moving in your career. You are progressing and setting goals and objectives for yourself and accomplishing them very rapidly. So it kind of seems to tie into what you were saying about, connection, career being important, easy to get overextended, but also because you're doing a lot of things, you're really tackling a lot in your career and to achieve your career goals, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And with that being said, too, it's also learning to evaluate who can come with you for that ride. So when it comes to really accepting, like you just said, like accepting these new responsibilities, going on these new educational endeavors, and it can be from I would say, traveling for, ambassador purposes with Western governors. This was a few years back, to, like accepting new promotions, promotional offers, to even just knowing that the new positions or these new endeavors, especially with school, are going to require more time out of me, which means I have less capacity to spend time with even myself at times and even others. So it's basically aligning myself with those who not only understand but have compassion for it. But if I know that others may not be along for that ride or don't have the capacity to walk along with me in that journey, then there has to come that realization and that acknowledgement that there may be a grieving process here, as I know that I'm going to lose these certain people in my life.
Mm-hmm. You've whetted my appetite here. We haven't talked about the story you're going to be sharing. It's going to be fresh for me as it is for anybody who's listening. So let's start to get into what you have to share today and your story. Let's start though, like I do with all guests. And as you think ahead to the conversation we're going to have for the next 45 minutes or so, what intention would you have for yourself from this experience?
I definitely want to share my story because I personally, especially like as recent as this week, I have spoken with at least a few people in my professional space, even at work, where I want to be able to discuss what it's like not only setting boundaries with yourself, but learning to accept what's not okay in terms of what you want to pursue in certain spaces. So the story that I definitely want to discuss today is really how to navigate a workspace or a workplace or an industry that not only may not be aligned with who you are, but even your goals, and how sometimes it's required for you to take a step back and really realign yourself with what your purpose is and learning how to step forward in that purpose.
What I'm taking from that, and this really resonates with me, is a sense of being able to maintain a sense of control and self in environments that will, by their nature and definition, challenge your ability to do that.
Oh, absolutely. And even in the way that it humbles you to where you may feel like you may feel like a failure at the end of the day.
Okay. Well, you shared your intention. My intention is to support your intention, help you accomplish what you want to accomplish here today. And that in you sharing your story, it will connect with someone out there, many someones, I hope, who see themselves in you and in your story, feel a little bit less alone, a little bit more connected, and ultimately will feel inspired and maybe even empowered to change how they approach themselves and others that day and beyond. So
absolutely.
Let's jump into the first question then. Blair, where have you found yourself sitting on a comma in your life?
Sure. So where I found myself sitting on a comma in my life, and I think you and I have kind of talked about this before. I think we kind of brushed on it in the past, but I was appointed and hired in, I would probably say, my first corporate level HR position. And I'm 28 now. This is when I was 26. So obviously this was one of those positions where, on the outside, it's like, oh yeah, you're in your mid-20s. You just got your master's. I mean, like you got your master's in business. You have this job that's so shiny. It makes six figures. You have like a bonus option. You have time off. You have everything. And then 83 days in, that picture of what life is like in corporate America, as opposed to the different industries that I had worked for with the level of support, wasn't necessarily aligned with what I had in mind. And where I found myself stuck on a comma was when I had received, some certain feedback from this prior director regarding, my performance in terms of how I was aligning with the industry and the specific position standards at that time. So where I found myself stuck on that comma was, where is my purpose? And basically, am I feeling like a failure already in my own industry? And I'm only 4 years in. So that was definitely a huge moment for me that not only humbled me, but it allowed me to sit with myself and sit with that discomfort of knowing that while I can take some accountability in some of these areas, there are parts that I cannot control, and I have to be able to move with my purpose, even if that means dissatisfying someone else. And that could be your friends, that could be your family members. And to be honest, that is actually what happened, even though it wasn't ever relayed to me in front of, my own face. I did have some folks that were not necessarily approving or supportive of the decision that I made to take a 33% pay cut and go back to an industry and a workplace that I truly thrived in, that I truly enjoyed, with the support that I received for my success. And I can't thank them enough for where I'm at now. So that's kind of an area where I felt myself stuck on a comma, and I really had to sit with myself and really, get with some of my really supportive people, such as my best friend, such as my auntie Brenda, and really sit with them in terms of, okay, I'm having issues struggling with having empathy and compassion, in this space of corporate America. But then it's like, okay, we have this going on. How can I hold myself accountable to what my goals are, how I want to meet this role's objectives, and whether or not there's a gap there that may not even be personal. It just may be not purpose driven. It may not be vision driven. It may not be aligned with my spirit.
Well, let me reflect a couple of things back, because you've shared a lot with us there, and it sounds like that was a very significant comma in your life, and especially at this stage in your career, as you said. One of the first things I heard you say was it wasn't really, and by the way, I do a lot of reflecting in these episodes and so forth. Correct anything that I reflect back, because it's just the way I heard it. That while this particular role, job, location, or whatever was a challenge, right? It prompted you. You said that it caused you to question your 4 years in that industry. So it wasn't just, oh, how am I doing at this job? It kind of knocked you back a little bit.
Yeah,
and made you question your whole career up to that point.
Yes, 100% my career, and even like to add to that. There was like, a lot of imposter syndrome. It was like, okay, am I capable of doing this work? I knew I was capable of doing the work. I was just not surrounded by the right people to support me in those efforts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and then the other thing that stood out was the amount of really self-reflection, self-observation, soul searching, and letting yourself kind of experience everything you were experiencing feelings wise, and then making a decision, stepping back to be true to yourself is what I wrote down in my notes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then that didn't just have ramifications for what it might mean for you title wise or specific job role wise or pay wise, but the people in your circle who had an opinion about the choices you made about your own job.
Right, exactly. And, this isn't even about the supportive ones. I was truly grateful that they were able to even have the capacity to hold the space for what I was going through, even though I would consider it like a first world problem in a way, because it's like, why would a 26-year-old, have these problems of making this amount of money and having this job and being able to support himself in this way? No, it wasn't about that. It's never about the money. And I've heard this so many times. Not all money is good money. And sometimes the priority in a workplace isn't about you. It's about that bottom line. And that's when I had that light bulb come off in my head, thanks to a therapist that spoke with me and clearly said, you cannot expect certain industries with certain leaders expect to be empathetic and compassionate, especially if all they're driven about is the bottom line. Their leadership style is they're going to be very autocratic. You have a very compassionate and empathetic approach to leadership. That's not going to align with you. I think you know the answer to the question that you're asking me already.
You bring up a really good point. First of all, I want to acknowledge you for, hitting this point. I'm going to say early in your career. And I don't mean that as let's talk about your age. It's people who have been people my age, right? Who have been out in the career for longer. And a lot of times people may not hit this point in their career or realize they've hit this point in their career until a little bit later on. So you went all in. I mean, this is my own kind of like, as I know you, as you do with so many things, like you kind of went all in and you did it sooner rather than later, right? So
yes, absolutely.
Acknowledgement, not necessarily by choice, but like you were presented with a situation and you're like, I have choices here, so let's just go all in and let's kind of get our hands dirty with this. And you said something important out loud, from my own experiences. It's easy to, for us as humans to feel feelings and to feel a certain way about what might unfold within this type of a corporate structure. But like you said, the fact is that's what that business is there to do. Profit is the thing that they are, set up for, or perhaps even legally required to do if they have shareholders, right?
Yes.
So we can have a position of victimization about it, or we can be like, well, that's what it is. Do I belong in this type of a structure?
Yes, exactly. And that's exactly the point that I ended up learning. And I'm very glad that, and honestly, this was a blessing in disguise. I had put in this notice, this 10-day notice, on my 83rd day at this role. I received what's called a note to file for all the things I did not hit. And it was about 2.5 pages long. And I realized, just based on reading it from a high level and actually looking back now, there were so many aspects of this role that were not necessarily, I wouldn't even say aligned with my career, but I was in the wrong industry, where I think I had mentioned to you on a personal level, where I was, like getting phone calls at 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And, the organization had really spouted off with work-life balance, but in reality, it was 12 hours a day, 5 days a week. So in reality, my hourly rate coming down to it in the hours that I had worked was definitely a whole lot less than my previous roles. And even though that track was a little bit more, I would say it would take me a little bit longer to get to those goals, but I had the right support in place. I had the right values in mind. I was with organizations that aligned with my value and with my purpose. When it came to being, onboarded and attempted to be groomed in a certain space, which would be the corporate space, it was all about, like we said the bottom line. We talked about operations and supply chain, how they wanted to have, like less labor and more productivity. So there were these certain numbers that you had to hit with 100 and 102% efficiency. And then, sometimes me having to have those tough conversations with folks regarding potential conversations with like suspensions and terminations. And I realized all at once that this isn't a space that I can provide this, because that's not who I am. You can be an HR professional in certain spaces. And I say this to everyone that's either exploring HR or currently in HR. HR is available to everyone in terms of who wants to pursue it, but it's all about the industry and the kind of support you either need or the kind of support you require. I'm the one that requires strong people management. They were strong results oriented. There are strengths and weaknesses to both. And I realized when I was a strong people manager, creating connections with others, building relationships with others, Yes, I can read a financial sheet from top to bottom. Yes, I can clearly interpret what a productivity sheet looks like in different areas and where opportunities are. I know how to translate that into actionable insights. But that's not what my purpose is. My purpose is to develop, to empower, and to inspire people to do better and to be better for themselves. And that wasn't the kind of role that I was in. And it was almost too late. And when I had spoken to this exact director, after I had signed the note to file, I had given her this notice. I said, look, I appreciate the opportunity here, but my passion isn't here. My passion is going to be somewhere else. It's not going to be in this industry. It's not going to be in this role. And in less than 24 hours, mind you, this is something else that I learned about corporate America. They shut off my access within 24 hours. I received my last check within 24 hours. I gave back all of my belongings within that same 24 hours. And that really told me the moment where corporate America is pretty much as apathetic as I thought in terms of my experience. And this is something that I want to share with those who are either thinking about going into corporate America or kind of going up the ranks, where your mental health and who you are as a person is going to be so much more than hitting the bottom line.
I hear a number of things here. One thing I want to acknowledge is a lot of what you're sharing is this was a difficult experience. There was a lot of things that you've shared that certainly, resonate with me. And anyway, without me making it about me, there's just a lot of this. And yet what I don't hear you saying is they should change or that's not okay, right? What I'm hearing is a very clear delineation between, and this is not to make them right or you right, them wrong or you wrong. I'm hearing you say there were a lot of signs and a lot of very dramatic and very significant and very uncomfortable and painful signs that showed me that was just not the place for me. You didn't say, well, they should have done and they could have changed and da-da-da. You got really clear very quickly on who they are and who they are going to be and who you are and who you're going to be. And I think there's something important in that because, and I know from my own experience, it's very easy when things don't go my way that I want to kind of, and I know this is a human thing too. It'll be like, oh man, they should be that, or they should be this, or that's not right, or whatever. And I had some experiences similar to yours where it's like, wait a minute, that person is not going to change because they're very comfortable with who they are. They are okay. Absolutely. That company is not going to change. In fact, they probably ought to lean more into who they are because that works for them. And why try to change it? So it comes back to this, what I'm hearing very clearly in you is this strong sense of self-awareness and the strong sense of no matter where I am and what I'm doing, constantly comparing it to your values, your purpose, as you said, and not is this place okay, but is this place right for me?
Yes. And I think that goes on both sides of the coin. I can get into specifics about recruitment and selection requirements and kind of where things fell by the wayside, because there were opportunities on both sides, mine's included, where I maybe should have asked deeper questions regarding even if it's as simple as expectations, as simple as core values, and even as simple as, how do you treat and how do you deliver bad news to your team members? And if I would have asked those questions up front, then maybe I wouldn't have had that push, but it was a blessing in disguise because it taught me so much in that little amount of time, in those 84 days that I had worked at that organization. It taught me where my strengths were. It taught me where my opportunities were. And it taught me that my values, my vision, and my purpose had never changed. I just had jumped at an opportunity that I believe was going to propel me for much, much further growth. But at this point where I'm standing today, I'm still growing. I'm still learning, and I'm still on that path, especially in a management position, especially this early on in my career. I just needed that right support. And I was just not aligned. It was what we call a misalignment. We don't place blame. We don't place shame. We call it shared accountability, and we call it misalignment.
Oh my gosh, this is what just came up for me as you were sharing that. And it's like, when you tell me, tell me if I'm off base, but it seems like, yeah, you, especially as somebody who was wanting very much to progress in his career, right? You see this job, it sounded like it had all kinds of things that would have been great for your career and growth. And then it didn't work out. You learned a lot of things about it. I could even reframe what you shared and said, it very much did position you for growth.
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
In a completely different way, right?
Yes.
It wasn't about you moving up in that job or that company and making that paycheck. Look what it did to you that will completely influence the entire rest of your career trajectory.
Absolutely. Yes.
Let me ask the second question. And you already jumped into some of the things you learned, which is great because I'm going to ask you that again here in a second. You can add to that. But when you look at this, and maybe for this next question, maybe there's not a lot you have to add here. I don't know. But when you look at this period, this comma that you were sitting on, what did or has that then created for you? I feel like you kind of talked a lot about that, but I want to give you a chance to add to that.
Yeah, sure. So I think you hit the nail on the head in terms of what did this create for me? So when I was sitting on that comma, when I was, talking with my close peers, which would be my closest friends, and also, an adult in my life that I looked up to, like at least, someone that has been in that corporate America space, a retired, like Fortune 500 company. I wanted to have that perspective because I not only needed the support, but I also needed an accountability partner to really help guide me in this big decision that I was making in terms of, do I really turn down a role like this early on in my career? Is there ever going to be any other opportunities for me? Like, I wasn't necessarily spiraling in a way because I knew I had accomplished so much up to that point that I knew that I wasn't going all the way back down to the bottom. So it was a matter of, do I stay persistent and maybe compromise my mental and my emotional health in this space and be groomed into being someone that I'm not? Or do I remove myself completely, be grateful, be blessed for that opportunity, and ensure that I move forward with no animosity and moving back into a space where I can not only grow and maybe not at the pace that I wanted, but maybe in a different space where I can own a lot more of my self-development, my professional development, and maybe I can change the way that I see my path moving forward in a different industry.
What did that, you said that so clearly, and what was happening for you? What was the feeling like for you as you were in this state?
So when I was in that state, I'm not going to lie to you, I had felt like some sense of shame because I have really reached that point of my life so early on in my life where I could provide for myself in a certain way where I can feel like I can prove to myself that I'm enough for this and I'm ready to do more and be more. But when I got knocked down based on, the circumstances that I encountered and that I faced in this role within the first 3 months, it was almost shocking in a way, especially when I had received, feedback, and it was a way in like corporate feedback cutthroat. It wasn't necessarily feedback that was delivered, as I mentioned in the previous part of this episode, with empathy, with shared compassion. There were spaces with that, but we just didn't click. Mm-hmm. And that was okay. And that's when I realized that, I really have to let go of this with the shame and the guilt and everything else in between. And something else that my therapist had mentioned to me was, you don't want to have, it sounds like this boss is like the parent whom you're recovering from. And that was a big telltale sign that this is not the right environment for me, even though there's a lot to unpack with that statement. But when you're in survival mode in a workplace, that automatically sets you up for failure because you're always hyper alert for certain threats when sometimes there are no threats. And I think that was a huge turning point for me because I really didn't know how to necessarily respond in those situations, but to just sit back, observe, and shut down in those spaces. And I did see myself shut down in many spaces, in many meetings, even though I understood, acknowledged information, I could look at reports, I could provide feedback. I just couldn't articulate that feedback in those situations.
Mm-hmm. Going through the motions and what you said there, I mean, it's so powerful. Like that feeling of shame at first sounds like for not meeting their expectations, this pressure you're putting on yourself. And then in a way, kind of what I was hearing too is this feedback that you were giving that was so blunt and so just like not in the way that you would deliver feedback.
Oh, absolutely.
Was also sort of like, for me, it seems like the universe was like being very, very clear to you. Like, because here's what I'm curious about. If that feedback had been delivered more empathetically, how much longer would you have held on? Would it have affected how long you held on?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I am a huge proponent of relationship management being one of the top reasons why I stay in a workplace. And once that relationship management barrier broke down and crumbled into pieces, that's when I told myself, this is not how you should be treated by a manager. This is definitely not a leader that you should be under. It's time for you to go, pack up your things, be empathetic, compassionate, and grateful, and let's go for a better chapter, for a better tomorrow.
Mm-hmm. Well, that takes us into the third question, and you've already started answering this question, but it's what did you learn about yourself as a result of sitting on this comma? What else would you add to that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So when I ended up sitting on this comma, I really, really learned, and this is another shout out to my aunt, we learned about accountability. And she said one quote, and I will quote her on this. She said, 100% of the decisions that you make in life, you are accountable for, the good, the bad, and the indifferent. Recognize what your reactions are from them, whether they are good or bad consequences, you are still accountable for them. Now, that's something I learned while I was sitting on that comma. This wasn't necessarily a good lesson. I mean, yes, it was a great lesson, but it wasn't the worst lesson I had ever, this wasn't one of those lessons. It was a lesson that opened my eyes to a different side of what my career could look like, and also the different types of relationships that are associated with this specific industry as an HR professional.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you though, this is such a powerful piece of advice that your aunt has given you. We're 100% accountable. This is not new news. This is talked about out there, right? This message is out there in society. What did that mean to you though? For you specifically, what did that mean to think about being 100% accountable for what's happened to you?
For me, being 100% accountable means not adapting a victim mindset. And I think we really tend to forget that. Mm-hmm. And when we say not adapting that victim mindset, yes, we like they say, life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you react. Mm-hmm. So I took that 10% and I said, okay, this happened to me. Now, how am I going to approach this? What am I going to do with this information? I called it the information gathering. I received this information from this specific manager. Was it blunt? Yes. Was there a bit of truth in there? Maybe so. I would say the answer is yes. Did it align with every single facet of my life? No. Was it a reflection of who I was? Absolutely not. Was it a reflection of my success? Absolutely not, because I wouldn't be sitting here today as an HR manager at 28 years old if it wasn't for the manager behind me who gave me such feedback.
Wow. So what you're saying is you're accountable for your choices, your reactions, and
absolutely all of the above.
What you take from the experience.
Yes. Okay. I can definitely start with the reactions. Even with the reactions, like even though, like we mentioned, maybe the somewhat harsh and maybe the blunt feedback that you may receive in corporate America, it's all about being grateful and thankful for that feedback. Feedback is a gift for a reason. People can choose to either give feedback to you or withhold it from you, so you don't have access to that information to increase your level of self-awareness. So I had to take that approach, even if it was uncomfortable in the moment. Did I have to sit with the anxiety a little bit? Absolutely. Did I have to swallow my pride and be humble? Yes. Did I have to eat crow? Without question. but it taught me an important lesson about it doesn't matter who gives you feedback in terms of your personality. It's all about that message that you take from it. You can take a bit or a piece from it, but you always you want to have a compassionate and thankful demeanor with someone who may be harsh or blunt with you. So at least not only you come out being the stronger person, but that means that you have acknowledged their message, even if you don't take 100% of that advice or that feedback that is being communicated to you.
I love this personally because this is one of the things, obviously, that, we talk about in coaching circles and we teach when I teach management and leadership courses and things like that. But feedback gets so easily misunderstood sometimes. But if you take it back to its root, feedback is literally just the bounce back effect, right? And yes. I'm not a music expert, but like if you look at the science of sound and so forth, feedback is just what happens when you put a sound out there and what bounces back, right? So feedback is not in and of itself inherently positive or negative, right?
No.
And what I love about what you're sharing is I could see the gift in the feedback that I was given, but I didn't have to take it all as truth. I didn't have to take it all as right or wrong. And it certainly didn't have to it did. It felt like it was a reflection on you in the moment, but it didn't have to have an effect on your identity or how you saw yourself.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing. That can be one of the hardest things for us as human beings, though, as we get that feedback. And especially if it feels like criticism and even praise, because it goes both ways, right?
Oh, yes.
And depending on who's delivering it and what the context is and how strong we feel in the moment, it's so easy for feedback to feel like some kind of a truth, like some kind of evaluation. And it's really just the evaluation of the person giving the feedback. You still have agency in receiving feedback. Is so important. So important. Not easy, as you've clearly identified for us, right?
No, you're right. And it's all about perspective too.
Every single person listening to you right now can think about a time when they received feedback that it crushed them, and yet it probably wasn't even true. Exactly. Or there was parts of it that were true that you needed to pay attention to, but the whole story wasn't necessarily true. I love that.
Absolutely.
What has changed for you as a result of sitting on this comma? What's different now?
So what's different now rather than before, and I actually just had a couple of recent conversations about this, and this really gives truth to not only how much time has passed since then, but how much work I've put into really developing myself since then. And what I have definitely continued to learn as a result of just sitting on this comment in general is really learning how to just take feedback as a gift. Not only being able to receive feedback without, retaliating back against the person, but just being able to say thank you, or being able to say, I really appreciate this perspective. I'll go ahead and take a look at this. I think it really goes so far beyond just receiving it, that really being able to communicate your appreciation to the other person is what really helps with your interpersonal skills. And I think that goes so unmissed even today when we have relationships with others and when we're going back and forth about certain areas of our lives that may need improvement, or we have a good friend of ours or a family member who is telling us about some of the blind spots that we have. It's all about understanding that feedback is a gift and it's always been optional. So I think for me, the biggest lesson that I've learned since then is really just being able to not only take feedback as a gift, but being grateful for it.
That gratitude message is important. What then would you say are you most grateful for from the feedback or the experience?
So what I'm really most grateful for regarding that experience is just the ability to be transparent when I shared my story with, let's say, my peers. I'll be very honest with that. Did I share this story with my parents? Probably not, because they have a different mindset surrounding management and leadership and the bottom line, especially, even though I have a parent who is knowledgeable about business practices, we are in a different time, we're in a different generation. He has a very bottom line oriented mindset, whereas I have a people management approach to results. So with that being said, when I was able to share this story, I really had to not only be selective about who I shared my story with, but I also really learned who was in my corner during that time. Because like you said earlier, I am very passionate and I am very driven about my career. So I really needed those in my life to, I wouldn't say step up to the plate and, like provide me with that support, but I really needed support in that time of need. And I was really grateful for, just some of the opportunities to just like share what was going on in my head in that space of, like, am I still going to be able to succeed even if I quit? Or is this going to look bad for the rest of my career? Am I going to have this red line for the rest of my life because I quit and, I couldn't stick through this corporate America challenge? It was just one of those areas of my life where I was really not only just kind of sitting stuck on that comma, but really being able to learn from it and then growing from it has really taken me to, and to be quite frank, right after I had resigned and, I gave my keys and all my items back, I accepted an offer back at my old workplace at a higher classification 6 weeks to the day after I was let go from that organization. So 42 days on the dot, I accepted that offer. And 3 weeks later, I was back in with a fresh new start. And I couldn't have been more grateful for the opportunity to just, it wasn't a start fresh, but let's start here and really make this opportunity worthwhile because it can lead you somewhere else. And that somewhere else is currently where I'm in now, where I accepted a promotion 15 months after I was appointed back in with the state where I'm at now. So it's definitely I have such gratitude for my mentors and my peers who really helped support me up to this point. And now it's kind of led me back to where I really wanted to be. And now I can just propel myself forward with the right support, which I am very grateful to have now.
Yeah. You just continue to show us how you're able to, I'm going to say, I'm not crazy about this phrase, but you're able to extract value from wherever you are. And I know a lot of times extracting value is used in an exploitative sense, but I mean that in a positive and resourceful sense. You take your situations and your circumstances, you evaluate them, you study, you observe them, and then you look at them from a lens of what can I take from it that will serve me? And I see you thinking long term without making decisions that are limited by the long term.
Yes.
And what a great, and it also strikes me as how your story shows us how the narrative isn't always true. You've kind of defied some of these narratives. Oh, you can't go back. That's one of the narratives you've defied. And in a way you didn't go back. You went back in a different capacity, in a different way. The narratives that, oh, you got to stick it out. If you make this decision, you're going to be, like you said, redlined or blacklisted or whatever the term is.
Yes.
Not true. And so you just kind of defied a lot of the things that I believe a lot of folks out there with very good reason are enduring circumstances that they have to go at their own speed, their own pace, and in their own way. But the story they're telling themselves may not necessarily be true, right?
Right.
Wonderful. Last question of the 5, Blair, what does getting off the comma look like to you?
So getting off the comma, and I am grateful for getting off that comma. And I would say that I probably got off that comma probably pretty recently, because just because you're able to start fresh doesn't mean the work is done. It was still about learning the lesson, taking heed to it, really learning to practice and start initiating a new way of thinking, establish that new pattern of not adopting that victim mindset, having gratitude for feedback, and really all about moving in my vision and my purpose in my career is really what helped get me off of that comma specifically. So I'd probably say getting off that comma for me, when I felt like I was, kind of stuck and almost questioned my career in a way, I really had to keep myself, moving forward. So I will say right after, to be quite frank and honest with you, after that moment where I had mentioned to you, I kind of had the 2.5 month break of what am I going to do? Um, by that time, I would say last year, I had still made the same amount of money that I had made with more satisfaction because of the opportunities I did receive. And I received another consulting opportunity as a result, also as a result of that experience too. So it ended up working tenfold, and I was still able to really learn what it is to be empowered in my own decision making in terms of accepting feedback as a gift and really learning to move in my vision and my purpose, and really also having that good and solid work ethic. So I would say, with that being said too, getting off that comma look like for me is really learning to take accountability, learning those lessons, and really being able to still hold empathy and compassion for myself by saying, you know what, Blair, even though this position didn't work out, it's going to be okay. There are plenty of other opportunities out there for you that will still fulfill what your own personal needs are. And that was a really fortunate circumstance for me to be in just within that short amount of time. And those opportunities led me to where I'm currently at now, which is, probably as of 4 weeks ago. So I was still able to propel and move myself forward just as a result of sitting on that one comma back in, August or September of 2022.
Yeah, well, it's so powerful, and I so appreciate what you've shared here. And it almost feels like the word you haven't said that seems to be underscoring everything is an element of trust. Would that be safe to say?
Yes, very safe.
Trust in yourself. Trust in, well,
Yes.
you tell me. I mean,
Yeah, so I would definitely say it was a combination of putting in the work, so trusting myself to do the work, but then also trusting the process at the same time, where I knew I would be led to, not to say where I belong, but where I needed to be in that time. So if, where I needed to be back in this same workspace that I was in, not only for the comfort and the safety of, having these established relationships already, but to also give back with, more expertise, more experience in HR, and being able to really, help a larger department really help achieve their hiring objectives and their goals. And then also with consulting, again, it was learning from that experience and really doing a 2-for-1, really taking what I've learned from based on my studies, my experience in nonprofit, government, and even corporate environments, and just really blending that all into one and really sharing my story, while also translating my story into effective goals and outcomes for the organizations that I previously and currently support.
So much in there. And I just have to say how much I appreciate your story, because I feel like this is going to resonate with so many people who are early in their career, as you are. And yet there's a lot of people, I look at my peer group, who are later in their career or mid in their career, that they're in the same types of situations, and some of these same things are probably going to resonate with them. Blair, what would you acknowledge yourself for?
So personally, well, that's a very loaded question. I would say acknowledging myself for really knowing what the true meaning of perseverance is when you're really faced with a challenge that you may not have the resources for, even if it's in a space where you spend that 8 to 5 and where you think you're going to spend the majority of your waking life in, which is pretty much a reality for the majority of us. It's really hard to step outside of ourselves and really think of a way out. And I think that's a very, very dark space to be in, and it very well can and is for a lot of people out there. But just really getting myself out of that space, because it could be lonely sometimes. It could, so when you don't have that support, quite frankly, just kind of turning inward and just taking time just out of all of the other responsibilities you have in your day, and just making time for yourself. And I started to make time for myself when I was, working the 10, 12-hour days and driving 3,000 miles a month, just to travel, for meetings and, all those site visits. I had to carve out time for myself and really say, is this something that I really want to do? Even if it's not going to be pleasing to others. So I acknowledge myself for really being able to break or starting to break a people pleasing mindset. And I think that's a lifelong journey that a lot of us have to learn. So if we're going to work because we're easygoing, we don't want to rock the boat, or, I'm an introvert, I'm just going to stay quiet. And I mean, I'm an introvert myself, but to that credit, I acknowledge that I really wanted to stay true to myself and find space in knowing that it's okay to be who you are, and really acknowledging the fact that when feedback is given, acknowledging that my personality has nothing to do with it. Who I am at its core is not going to be relevant to anything in the professional space. Mm-hmm. And I realized that it wasn't my fault, or it wasn't this person's fault. So it was just acknowledging that, being able to get myself out of that really depressing space for me was really like move that needle forward towards, being a better person just for me, because I learned how to do more things for me, not at the satisfaction of others.
Yeah. You can definitely see all of these things that you've taken from this, and just so much that lies ahead of you is just really exciting to see. Blair, how can people find you if they wanted to get in touch with you or follow what you're up to?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, certainly. So you can find me on LinkedIn, Blair Eversley, should be in the show notes. That's like one of the main ways that definitely people can find me and have found me. And, LinkedIn has definitely been a great resource, in terms of connecting with others. And I think that's how we connected in the first, the first place. Yeah. So that is definitely one place where I am open to messages, just being transparent. If anybody, needs any like advice, or just need like just a space to, kind of have like not even a second opinion, or, just to ask questions about, like this space of like HR and like where they're at in their careers, or really just learning how to, like build relationships with different personalities. I am definitely one of those go-to people, because I've been through it and I've been able to get out of those spaces.
Yeah.
And into something better.
Yeah, good. And then one of the things we do on every episode, because I feel like it's so important, what we're doing here is about connection and community and lifting up voices for all of us. And it's also a part of your story, since this is your episode today. So we call it acknowledgements, and it's who in your circle, life, community would you like to give a voice to, give attention to, lift up, or boost? And that can be causes or individuals. Who would you like to acknowledge from your circle that people can look into?
Oh, yeah. So the who I would love to acknowledge is I would really love to acknowledge just like my best friend, Melanie. She's been one of the wisest people in my circle. That is my peer for about 10 years now. I always tell her she has the advice and the wisdom of a 55-year-old, woman. And I say that to her credit because of the amount of just basically the messages that she gives in certain situations where I feel like I'm being compromised. And, she shares a space for me to have compassion, but to also balance that accountability piece. And I really think that's what true friendships look like, as you really kind of step into and look kind of beyond what adulthood is it should be that space for you to be safe, but it's also going to be that space for you to, hey, here's the mirror. I need you to look at this mirror. What do you see in this mirror? And what changes do you need to make in order for you to be a better person?
Yeah, great. And you had a couple of other folks that you wanted to briefly acknowledge as well, right?
Certainly. Yeah. So I wanted to mention my aunt, just basically for her support, like showing up to like my graduation parties, really seeing me kind of go through my worst when it came to giving feedback. Like she had definitely heard me in some of those vulnerable moments, but also at the same time, learning and growing in these different roles. And she's definitely seen my change. And I really appreciated her support and being in my corner and really teaching me, what it means to really have relationship building skills in a people-centric career. So this one's just a podcaster. This one, her name is Sabrina Sohart. She focuses on what's called the Do the Work podcast. Even though it's about relationships and like dating per se, what she really hits home with is really how do you take accountability for you? How do you sit with your own discomfort, and instead of reacting, why don't you get curious and start asking yourself questions instead of jumping the gun or spiraling in a way? So definitely, to her credit, that has definitely really helped in maintaining and deepening the relationships that I currently have. So definitely shout out to her as well.
Well, Blair, thank you so much. You've given us so much to think about, and we're so grateful for you sharing this story and all of the just the vulnerability that you shared within that. And I know this is going to lift up and give hope to a lot of people out there. You and I obviously will continue to meet for lunch and
yes,
other gatherings and get-togethers. So I'm looking forward to our ongoing conversation. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend ahead. And I'm so glad to have you here.
All right. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this opportunity.
What an honor and a privilege it is for me to witness these powerful stories. I hope you feel the same way too. I invite you to think about what you learned from this conversation. What stood out for you? What challenged you? What inspired you? And I encourage you to write it down in some form of journaling and reflection. It can be magical to set aside your expectations and just let the thoughts flow out of your head and onto paper, and surprises can reveal themselves to you. And if you do discover something you'd like to unpack further, book a call with me and let's talk about it. My links are in the show notes. Meanwhile, be sure to like this episode and follow the podcast here on this platform. Also, follow me on social media at Off the Comma. Interact with the posts, share what you learned from each episode, or just share your thoughts about the topic in general. And check out my website for workshops, events, and updates. If you were moved by today's conversation, pass it along to someone you care about. Thank you for listening to this episode of Off the Comma. As always, keep noticing and keep listening.